Ever notice those people who just know things without anyone telling them? They don't overthink, they don't need proof, they just feel what's true. And somehow they're right. What if you did that too? If you stopped doubting that feeling in your gut, if you trusted that inner voice that speaks without words, what would change? That's what matters here. When you start listening to your intuition, something strange happens. The world shifts. People who thought they knew you get confused because they're used to you needing facts, needing time to think, needing others to help you decide. Jung said, intuition is knowing without knowing how you know. Think about that. When you feel something's wrong with no proof, who gets upset? Who says you're being silly? Who demands you explain yourself? Their reaction shows more about them than you. You've been trained to ignore what you feel, to only trust what you can prove, to need permission before you believe something. And every time you ignore your gut feeling, you lose a piece of your power. At the end of the day, you feel empty, tired, and lost. Why? Because you keep pushing away your own wisdom to make others comfortable. This isn't about being irrational, it's about being whole. Jung talked about connecting your thinking mind with your feeling mind. This happens when you finally understand that sometimes you just know things without knowing why, and that's okay. So I'm asking you now, how long will you keep ignoring what you feel? How long will you let others tell you not to trust yourself? Maybe it's time to listen to that voice inside, because when you trust your intuition, everything changes. Since you were little, people told you to be reasonable, to think it through, to prove it. They made you believe that your worth comes from how well you can explain your choices. But here's something maybe no one told you clearly. Always needing proof is like being in a cage. As long as you need evidence for every feeling, reasons for every hunch, you'll miss the deepest truths. Why? Because trusting only what you can prove makes you miss half of reality. People who only use logic are like someone trying to see colors through a black and white TV. Jung talked about our inner knowing, this natural wisdom we all have. That's what your intuition connects to. You doubt its whispers. You ignore its warnings. You push away its guidance, like it's wrong to just know something without proof. But the more you ignore this inner voice, the more you disconnect from your true path. Not trusting intuition is actually betraying yourself. It's trying to fit into a world that only values what can be measured and proven. This comes at a high price, your wholeness. People who want you to doubt your feelings don't want your depth. They want what makes sense to them. When you say, I just know, without being able to explain why, they get uncomfortable. Not because you're wrong, but because you've stepped outside their box. The less you trust your intuition, the more lost you become. Because real wisdom starts with feeling, not thinking. No great discovery happened without intuition first. No meaningful path was found just by planning. Think about the most important decisions in your life. The best ones probably weren't made with spreadsheets and pro-con lists alone. They were guided by something deeper, that knowing feeling that simply wouldn't go away. The job that felt right despite the lower salary. The home you knew was yours the moment you walked in. The person you trusted instantly while others took months to see their true nature. These weren't coincidences or lucky guesses. This was your intuition working perfectly, exactly as it was designed to work. As Jung discovered, intuition doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from everywhere. It's your unconscious mind processing thousands of subtle details your conscious mind could never track. Stop and think about what your gut has been telling you. What feelings have you been pushing away? What knowing have you been doubting? Before answering that, we need to understand why we doubt ourselves so much. The answer is in what Jung called our divided self. We'll talk about that next, because your intuition connects you to wholeness, and if you don't learn to trust it, something important in you stays asleep. If this makes sense to you, hit subscribe. Thanks for your support. Jung didn't see our minds as just thinking machines. He saw them as energy systems where feelings and thoughts work together. Every intuition, every dream, every symbol connects us to wisdom beyond what we can explain. The question is, are you listening to your intuitive feelings or just your logical thoughts? Every time you push away a gut feeling, you block your natural wisdom. When you talk yourself out of a clear intuitive warning, when you ignore that feeling in your stomach just to seem reasonable, when you overthink everything, you cut yourself off from half of your intelligence. Jung was clear. Intuition sees what eyes can't. The more you fight it, the more disconnected you become. People who ignore their intuition aren't more reasonable, they're just half awake. And here's what happens when you don't trust your feelings. You become predictable, easy to control. People who fear intuition notice when you need proof for everything. They see you trying to make sense of things that should just be felt, and they use this against you. This pattern plays out everywhere. In relationships where you sense something's wrong but stay because there's no proof. In jobs where you feel stagnant but continue because it looks good on paper. In friendships that drain you but you maintain because they never did anything bad. You ignore that voice inside saying, "This isn't right," while your logical mind says, "But I can't explain why." What's really happening in these moments? According to Jung, you're experiencing the disconnect between your conscious and unconscious mind. Your unconscious sees the whole picture, all the subtle patterns, the small inconsistencies, the hidden truths. But your conscious mind, trained to trust only what it can name and measure, overrules this deeper knowing. The result? You live a half-life, guided by half-truths, making decisions with half your intelligence. Jung said, healthy people use both feeling and thinking together. This means trusting your gut without shame, following inner guidance without needing approval, knowing when thinking alone can't find the answer. This only happens when you know yourself well enough to recognize your intuitive signals. How many times have you kicked yourself for ignoring a warning feeling? How many hours have you spent overthinking when deep down you already knew what to do? Intuition works like radar. When you trust it, it brings clarity. You walk into a room and just know what's really happening without a word. But when you ignore it, you become confused, doubtful, unsure. And the world has no patience for people who can't access their own inner wisdom. The tragedy is that many people have spent so long ignoring their intuition that they no longer recognize its voice. They mistake anxiety for intuition, or wishful thinking, or fear. But true intuition has a different quality. It comes with a sense of quiet certainty, even when you don't want to hear it. It doesn't shout, it simply knows. Start noticing how intuition feels in your body. Does your stomach tighten? Does your chest feel open or closed? Do you feel energy or heaviness? These signals are how wisdom speaks to you. Pay attention, not to become irrational, but to become whole. Our modern world has made this harder than ever. We're surrounded by noise, distraction, and information overload. We've been taught to trust Google more than our gut, to check reviews instead of checking in with ourselves, to seek external validation rather than internal knowing. We're more connected to everything except our own intuition. Jung discovered something amazing. When you honor intuition, you break free from collective blindness. This scares people because most have lost touch with their own inner knowing. Next, we'll explore why logical people fear intuitive ones and how trusting your gut completely changes your life. Get ready to see clearly those who've been keeping you disconnected from your own wisdom. You think logical analysis gives you control. You believe if you gather enough facts, you'll find certainty. But here's the deeper truth. Most of your best decisions came through intuition first, not thinking. People who understand this navigate life more easily. Purely logical people don't need to prove everything or quote experts. They just dismiss feelings as being emotional, and you start doubting yourself. Jung called this the shadow, rejecting in others what we fear in ourselves. But there's more happening. When others reject intuition, you start cutting yourself off from it too. Remember that time you just knew something without knowing how? That relationship that felt wrong from day one? That decision that seemed right despite all evidence? That wasn't imagination or being irrational. That was your intuition speaking its ancient language. Why do you ignore it? Because you're afraid of being wrong, of seeming foolish, of being judged. The deepest control doesn't happen through argument. It happens through doubt. When you feel you need proof for what you already know in your gut, when you think you need to explain your feelings, even when your intuition speaks clearly. Consider how society treats intuitive people. They're called overly sensitive or too emotional. Their insights are dismissed until proven right, and even then, people say it was just a coincidence. This collective dismissal of intuition isn't accidental. A society of people deeply connected to their intuition would be harder to manipulate, harder to sell to, harder to control through fear and doubt. This is why advertisements use logic to override your intuition. Don't listen to that feeling that you don't need this. Look at all these features. This is why toxic people provide logical explanations for behaviors that feel wrong to you. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just busy with work. You're being too sensitive. Here's the key. Logical minds don't need to convince you they're right. They just need you to keep doubting yourself. But when you start trusting your gut, everything changes. When you honor those feelings, when you move forward without having all the logical pieces, something begins to heal inside you. This makes others uncomfortable because they can no longer predict you. Worse, they have to face their own disconnection from intuition. Your confidence threatens them because it forces them to see their own blindness. Jung observed this pattern repeatedly in his patients. Those who trusted their intuition often faced initial resistance from family, friends, even society. But this resistance wasn't about the intuitive person being wrong. It was about others feeling threatened by someone who could access wisdom they couldn't understand or control. Think about the visionaries throughout history, from artists to scientists to leaders. Most were initially ridiculed for trusting what they just knew before evidence proved them right. Einstein spoke of his theories coming to him as images and feelings before he could put them into mathematical language. Artists speak of following an inner voice that guides their creations. Successful entrepreneurs often describe just knowing a market opportunity would work despite others' doubts. Then comes the questioning, the demand for proof, the logical arguments, not because you're wrong, but because you stopped playing by their rules. Jung said, "Your vision becomes clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." When you trust intuition, when you stop needing others to validate your knowing, you'll meet resistance. But what about you? Are you ready for people calling you irrational or impulsive for trusting your gut? Are you ready to stand in certainty even when others doubt? Because in that certainty, a new kind of understanding is born. Next, we'll discover why intuition is actually the most powerful guide in life and how it completely changes the way you move through the world. Today's world is obsessed with proof. Everyone wants evidence, explanations, and analysis, even when it costs them their own inner wisdom. But there's a power few people access, and even fewer master, the power of intuition. Not wild guessing or impulsiveness, but deep knowing. The kind of intuition that doesn't fight against reason, but goes beyond it. Jung saw intuition not as anti-logical, but as a higher form of intelligence. When you trust your gut feelings, you start seeing things others miss. Deeper patterns, hidden meanings, future possibilities. Intuition gives you wholeness, and wholeness threatens those living in fragments. This is what Jung meant by individuation, becoming a complete individual by integrating all parts of yourself, especially the intuitive aspects that society taught you to suppress. He saw this as the ultimate goal of psychological development, not just healing trauma or reducing symptoms, but becoming whole. Look at people who've mastered this integration. They don't swing between cold logic and wild emotion. They don't need to choose between thinking and feeling. They flow between these modes naturally, using each when appropriate. They analyze when analysis helps, and they trust their gut when intuition speaks. This flexibility gives them an edge in every area of life. Notice how some people get defensive when you know something without being able to explain how, when you sense a truth, when you just trust a feeling. It's not because you lack thinking skills, it's because your intuition takes away their control. While you analyze and explain, you're playing their game. But when you trust your gut, you change the rules. This unsettles anyone who needs pure logic to feel safe. The strongest people aren't those who ignore their intuition for logic's sake, nor those who follow feelings blindly. The strongest integrate both, understanding that intuition and reason are complementary tools, not opposing forces. Jung compared this integration to alchemy, turning the lead of our fragmented selves into the gold of wholeness. Real intuition isn't the opposite of logic. It combines conscious and unconscious knowing. It refuses to be limited by what can be immediately proven. Jung believed becoming a complete human requires this integration. Only by uniting intuition with reason can you see reality clearly. But trusting intuition has a cost. It will distance you from people who only valued you for being predictable. It will make you seem strange to those who only saw you through logic. You'll appear different, unpredictable, maybe even threatening. But this reaction comes from people who never wanted to know your depth, only your surface. The truth is, the more you awaken, the more you trust your intuition. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your inner wisdom. Think of intuition as a language, the language of your deepest self. When you first begin listening to it, you might only catch fragments, like learning a new language and only recognizing a few words. But with practice, the messages become clearer. You start to distinguish between true intuition and fear, between wisdom and wishful thinking. You develop fluency in your own inner knowing. Sometimes intuition isn't irrational, it's sovereign. It's the language of people who no longer need others to validate what they know deeply. Intuition makes others uncomfortable because it forces them to face the limits of pure logic. Their discomfort shows more about them than about you. You don't need to explain your intuitive knowing. It proves itself through results. People threatened by your intuition reveal how much they needed your self-doubt to feel certain themselves. This is precisely why Jung encouraged people to keep journals of their intuitive hits, not to prove anything to others, but to prove to themselves that their intuition was trustworthy. When you track intuition over time, you notice its remarkable accuracy, far beyond what could be explained by chance or confirmation bias. You build trust in your own inner guidance system. But the strongest intuition isn't the one that challenges others. It's the intuition that guides you from within, the knowing that connects you to something beyond logical limitations. In this space where mind and heart unite, you access your complete wisdom and reconnect with your whole self. Next, we'll explore how to develop intuition consciously, how to recognize its signals, understand its language, and trust what it reveals, even when logic can't yet follow. It's time to learn to be guided by your complete self. Understanding intuition intellectually isn't enough if you keep ignoring gut feelings, dismissing hunches that prove right, overthinking decisions, and staying locked in a purely rational approach out of fear. Awareness without trust is just another form of self-limitation. Real change begins when you firmly decide to become intuitive. This takes psychological courage. Conscious intuition isn't about being illogical or impulsive. It's about not being restricted to what can be immediately proven. Jung found that developing intuition often required a period of active imagination, intentionally engaging with symbols, dreams, and inner images that arise naturally in your mind. This practice strengthens the connection between conscious and unconscious, making intuitive signals clearer and more accessible. He also observed that intuition flourishes in moments of quiet, when the logical mind isn't dominating with its constant chatter. This is why many people report stronger intuitive feelings during meditation, walks in nature, or upon waking. The logical mind relaxes its grip, allowing intuitive wisdom to rise to the surface. It's about owning your wisdom, your knowing, your inner guidance. Start with small steps. Don't demand explanations for everything. Breathe before analyzing. Step away from endless thinking. Turn off your doubts without shame. Say, I sense this, or I feel drawn to this, or I know this is true. Begin with low-risk situations. Notice which restaurant you feel drawn to without checking reviews first. Take the route that feels right without consulting your GPS. Talk to the person you feel a connection with without analyzing why. These small exercises build your intuitive muscles without triggering fear of serious consequences. Most importantly, you don't need to justify your intuition. You don't need to explain your knowing. You don't owe anyone proof except your own results. This makes many people uncomfortable because when you stop doubting yourself, they lose power over you. They can no longer keep you in a box where you're always predictable and controllable. Jung understood that becoming whole requires integration, not forced but natural. A time of inner unification where you learn to trust your own signals without interference. You rebuild your sense of self not based on what others can understand, but from your own inner certainty. This journey isn't always smooth. You'll have moments of doubt, times when you wonder if you're just making things up. Jung called this the tension of opposites, the natural push and pull as you integrate intuition with your rational mind. Rather than seeing this tension as a problem, he viewed it as productive energy, the very force that drives growth and transformation. Want to know if you're growing? Watch who questions you when you become more intuitive. Notice who demands proof when you trust your gut. See who calls you irrational when you honor your feelings. These aren't signs you're wrong. They're proof you're becoming whole. Being intuitive feels strange at first. You might feel uncertain. You might think you're being misled. You'll hear you're being impulsive. This is part of waking up. You've spent years being taught to doubt your inner knowing. Change brings discomfort not just to you, but to everyone who benefited from your predictability. Conscious intuition forms the foundation of self-knowledge. When you say yes to inner wisdom, you say yes to wholeness. When you move beyond pure analysis, you affirm that your complete self matters more than partial understanding. When you stop needing external validation, you begin to find real power, even if few understand it. Not everyone is ready for this awareness because your intuitive confidence exposes limitations they don't want to face. It reveals how much they depended on your self-doubt to feel certain. This is what Jung meant by the individuation process, becoming fully yourself, distinct from collective expectations and projections. This process naturally separates you from those who wanted you to remain in the comfortable box of predictability. It's not about becoming better than others. It's about becoming more authentically yourself. Remember that intuition isn't just about the big moments, the career changes, relationship decisions, or life-altering choices. It also guides you in small, everyday ways. How to approach a difficult conversation, when to reach out to a friend who's struggling, which creative approach will work for a project. These seemingly minor intuitive nudges can transform your daily experience from mechanical to meaningful. This is when transformation happens. With it comes uncertainty, questioning, testing. You feel like you're risking something when really you're just waking up to your complete self. What happens after this? What comes after integration? What grows from intuition? In our final part, we'll explore the clarity that only comes when you have the courage to be intuitive, to be whole, and to become complete within yourself. It's time to understand why the wisdom of the integrated is the path to true perception. When you start trusting your intuition, something profound happens. First comes doubt, that uncomfortable questioning inside you. You wonder if you should really trust this feeling, if you're being foolish, if you're missing something important. But gradually this uncertainty transforms. It begins to clear up, to confirm itself, to show its value. Then comes a different kind of certainty. Not the certainty of proof, but the certainty of knowing deeply, your own knowing. The certainty of someone who no longer splits themselves into thinking me and feeling me. Jung called this the transcendent function, the emergence of a third perspective that unites opposites, neither purely intuitive nor purely logical, but a higher integration of both. This integration doesn't happen once and forever. It's an ongoing process of growth, requiring constant attention and care. But with each cycle of integration, you become more whole, more authentic, more alive. In this space where confusion once lived, clear vision enters. Where hesitation was, confidence grows. Where division existed, a new wholeness emerges. The wholeness of being complete in yourself. The world looks different from this perspective. You see not just what is, but what could be. You sense not just what people say, but what they mean. You understand not just the facts of a situation, but its deeper patterns and possibilities. This isn't magical thinking, it's integrated perception, seeing with both your conscious and unconscious mind. Jung said, "Becoming who you truly are requires uniting your conscious and unconscious minds, integrating intuition with logic, walking in wholeness, not division." That's exactly what happens when you decide to trust your gut. You're not rejecting thinking, you're becoming complete. This completion changes how you move through the world. Decisions become clearer, relationships deepen or naturally fall away, work becomes more purposeful and aligned, not because circumstances magically change, but because you're finally seeing clearly, without the distortions of self-doubt or fragmentation. This is when you stop being a doubter and become a knower. You stop being fragmented by uncertainty and start shaping your reality from integrated wisdom. People uncomfortable with your intuition show they never wanted your growth. They wanted the limited version of you they could understand. Now that you're whole, they don't know what to do with you. This is freeing. You might lose some certainties, but you'll find your wisdom. You'll move away from fragmentation toward wholeness. You'll become more mysterious, but finally, more authentic. Jung observed that truly individuated people often appeared enigmatic to others, not because they were trying to be mysterious, but because they operated from a deeper level of understanding than most. They seemed to navigate life with an invisible map, sensing currents and patterns others couldn't perceive. This wasn't supernatural. It was simply the natural result of integrating intuition with conscious awareness. When you fully trust intuition, you become insightful, attuned, unforgettable. This isn't just a small change, it's a rebirth, the start of a life where you're no longer available for self-doubt, mental prisons, or divisions disguised as rationality. Now you only accept what fits with your knowing, your truth, your whole self. If you've read this far, part of you is ready for this path. Part of you already understands that being logical means nothing if you have to abandon your intuition to do it. True self-knowledge starts when you choose wholeness, even if it costs you certain comfortable certainties for a while. I want to ask you now, are you ready to be called irrational, questioned, or even dismissed because you trust your deeper knowing? Are you willing to pay the price of being whole? The path isn't always easy, but it leads to the most authentic life possible, one guided not just by external maps, but by your own inner compass. As Jung wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And becoming who you truly are means honoring all of yourself, including the intuitive wisdom society taught you to doubt. If this message touched you, if it makes sense in your gut, write in the comments, "I trust my intuition." Let's see how many are ready for this integration. And don't forget to watch the next video. It matters more than you might think. See you there.